So I'm standing here with Tom Leonard, who is writing a feature for the Mail here at the UN Climate Talks, and we're just going to ask you a couple of questions about media coverage and climate change. But perhaps first off, we could ask you to introduce yourself and the feature that you're writing here.
Well, I'm the US correspondent of the Daily Mail, as you said, and I've come down from New York to write a piece about why. About the conference, and I think in a lot of readers' minds they will remember what happened at Copenhagen last year, and so there's an obvious interest in what happens at Cancun.
And how are you finding it covering the conference so far? It's obviously quite a challenge, the logistics.
Yeah, well, I'm a newcomer on it, which is often quite a good way of seeing things like this. And I think the first thing that hit me was the blizzard of acronyms, and for the outsider, the unintelligibility of much of the discussion. I think it's very much something that's quite difficult for outsiders to understand, and I think that's a danger with it. You know, it's like-minded people talking to like-minded people, always a problem with these. Well, potentially a problem with this kind of thing. Yeah.
It is certainly a challenge, the number of acronyms here. How are you going to try and make this intelligible to your readers?
Well, I think I'll try and keep the acronyms to a minimum and just try and pick out the most entertaining ones.
And do you have a narrative so far to your story?
Not really. I mean, it's quite obviously the main theme this year is that it's a quiet year. In fact, a British activist just put it to me rather well. She said if you take Copenhagen and Cancun and Durban in 2011, this is they're like a trilogy of films, and the middle one is always the boring one. I think that's the sentiment this year. I think there's a conscious effort here not to make too much razzmatazz, because they quite clearly don't want people to. You know, that's what happened at Copenhagen, and all went horribly wrong. So they're trying a new tack.
And are Daily Mail readers interested in climate change at the moment? Obviously, you've got the recession, which is a massive issue. Like, how are you going to make them engage with this topic?
That's the point. I mean, that's an interesting point. They want to know what. I mean, I think what they want to know is this worthwhile? Is it worthwhile that 15,000 people are flying off to Cancun at God knows what in carbon footprint, and having 2 weeks in luxury hotels discussing climate change, when when a lot of people have come here, to be honest, saying nothing's going to happen, which is not a very good base for starting any kind of endeavour like this. So I think there's a big problem with the summit in that respect. I mean, I think I met someone on the plane, and he said he worked for an NGO, non-government organisation. See, I'm getting the acronyms already. And he said, I don't think we'll come next year. And he hadn't even been to the summit. And I thought that was a slightly sad thing to say about it. So they've obviously got a lot to prove this year.
I think that is a sense that many people here have picked up on, and I guess if there's such slow progress, and that is very frustrating to a lot of our viewers as well, I know. But when you're seeking such huge changes in society and in the way that we live our lives, do you think there's alternative kind of venues for these discussions and for climate change to be resolved?
Well, obviously some people think there is. Barack Obama has moved away from the UN, and he's given indications in the last year that he wants to do it with a smaller group of people. And the Americans are saying, and you're really not going to get a president who's probably more in favour of tackling climate change than Barack Obama, that he wants that he doesn't see it can ever be resolved in a kind of consensual way. And I have to say, personally, I find it very odd that this idea of everyone having their say is very laudable in one way, but one wonders whether it will get anything done. And just the different parties are coming at this with such different obvious objectives and different concerns that I'm not sure if it's going to if this is the answer and if it is going to work. And there've been so many of these summits, and they don't seem to have achieved a great deal.
And do you think that we could still realise a just solution to this issue if it doesn't involve everybody? Because obviously those most vulnerable and those being impacted first and worst are often poor countries who don't have a big kind of diplomatic service and who are often not invited to many of the conferences and talks that take place outside of this arena. Is there any hope for them if the UNFCCC, this climate talks stops?
Yeah, I know that is the problem, and what they're just like these, the small island nations. I mean, they're the ones who are really facing, according to them, kind of extinction by 2050, and they can reel off a number of islands that will have gone by then. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be really hard to iron it out. I mean, the other big problem here is that the Americans have given every indication that that they're not going to be particularly willing to play ball unless it's completely on their own terms. And Barack Obama's just facing now the fact that his party doesn't control the House of Representatives in Washington. So it's going to get worse. In that respect, to the parties, the two, China and America seem to be moving further away from each other rather than closer since Copenhagen.
We've just actually come from a side event here where the media coverage of climate change has come in for a lot of criticism. Do you feel a sense of responsibility here that actually you're covering something where if we get it wrong, it's the planet that's at risk? Does that weigh on your shoulders when you're reporting on this?
Not really. I don't think that's what journalism's about. I think the main thing, hold on, just stop. So one of my colleagues, this is a whole load of British journalists who've come here. So these are the people you need to target. This is the British press corps, so that's very well done.
Maybe we could talk to you.
Yeah, they do. Hold on, is it David? Oh. David, come over here. I've talked long and hard to these people, and they actually want to talk to a proper environment correspondent.
Yeah. This is concerning.
No, don't say that. It'll go on the outtakes.